City Council is now in order at 6 p.m. Council Member Vincent Vocal will provide the invocation tonight, and then the pledge will be led by?
Yes, the firefighters.
All right. Let's stand for the invocation, then the pledge.
Heavenly Father, thank you for another beautiful day in the Texas Hill Country. Thank you for the rain we have received. I pray for safety and good health for our community, and safety and good health for our first responders, and for us to keep everyone in mind while making decisions tonight. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Amen. Amen. Okay.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Amen.
And now, items of interest to the community, and these are not related to agenda items, but particular announcements.
Yes, sir. I want to say hello to everybody, especially welcome our firefighters over here. Roger, it's great to see you. Can't wait for the ceremony in just a few minutes. Let's talk about, we've got quite a few things coming up. I'm going to run through them pretty quick because we've got a long agenda. But if you like scary stories, you want to be at the library tomorrow at 4:30. Because we've got Donna Ingham. She's been at the library several times, and she's going to be back tomorrow talking about haunting tales of Texas. She does a great job with the stories that she's done, and like I said, she's been there several times. We've got great reviews. This performance is free and open to the public, and it's going to be on the first floor again at 4:30 tomorrow. So this is perfectly timed for Halloween. If like I said, if you like spooky stories, come on by and see it. Okay, movies in the park. Oh, this is always a great thing. I guess we discontinued it about 2 months ago when the season ended out in the summer, but we took a poll about what citizens would like to see for Halloween, and this is the movie that they came up with. So we're going to show it at 9 o'clock Friday night at Louise Hayes Park. So we invite all of y'all to come on out and bring your chairs, your blankets, and sweaters. There's going to be complimentary candy, a chance to win a big prize, and Jimmy John's will be there if you get hungry and want a sub sandwich. For the little ones, if you come dressed up as a monster, you'll automatically be entered to win a Halloween basket filled with candy, movies, and other treats.
Not big ones?
I'm sorry?
You said for the little ones, so big ones?
Well, it might be big ones too.
Okay.
I'm
All right.
not sure on that one, but
Check.
I think it's going to be a lot of fun, and I'm sure we'll see a lot of people out there. All right, this is always a great event. This is next Wednesday, Family Fright Night. It's definitely family-oriented, not very frightful, as you can see from the picture. So feel free to come on out. This is going to be at Louise Hayes Park from 5:30 to 8:30. This is, like I said, this is so much fun when you come out and you see these little kids in their outfits, and the parents in their outfits too. It's worth going just to see the imagination that goes into some of these. As I said, it's from 5:30 to 8:30. There's going to be a bounce house, games, a costume contest, and more. So feel free to come on by. And then we have one more week left on time to register your business or organization to take part in the 2018 Holiday Lighted Parade. That's going to be Saturday, November 17th. Registration is $20 per entry, and that ends next Friday, November 2nd. Now, there will be late registration, but the entry fee goes up a little bit to $35. So if you're interested in getting a float into that, please call the 258-1151, or you can register online on our city website. Just a couple of more quick things. We have a new city newsletter debuting tomorrow. Some great information in there about our upcoming 2019 budget, as well as some of the items that I just mentioned to you. So you can look for that in both the Kerrville Daily Times and the Hill Country Community Journal. Encourage you to check it out. Now, we've had a couple of questions with hunting season coming up about hunting in the city limits and in city parks. So we want to, with deer season coming, the city and this particular deer in the picture, want to offer a friendly reminder that no hunting is allowed in our city parks. So if you see that deer in your sights, just remember, don't shoot. And as far as hunting in the city, these are some of the regulations. Actually, hunting is not prohibited within the city as long as all state laws are followed. It is illegal to discharge a firearm inside a city park, like I just said. State laws specifically prohibit shooting across a public roadway and across property lines. And while state laws make it legal to hunt in a subdivision, it is still impractical since a missed shot would likely cross a property line or a public roadway. State law prohibits disorderly conduct and includes making unreasonable noises other than at a sports shooting range, discharging a firearm in a public space other than a gun range, or displaying a firearm in a manner calculated to alarm. For safety reasons, the Kerrville Police Department highly discourages and doesn't recommend that anyone discharge a firearm in the city. Even if an individual discharges a firearm within the bounds of the city, there are significant civil liability issues if the projectile discharge causes property damages and or injuries to a person. So I hope that answers some of the questions that were asked about that.
You know, my husband and I were walking on the trail Sunday, and we ran into a couple that was from San Antonio. The guy said, "I wish I had my gun on this walk." I think he was kidding, but I thought, you
Well, I
know,
hope so.
we probably should. Do we have any signs just for those that are out of town that are not? I don't think someone would hunt on our river trail, but no
I
hunting.
don't think we have any signs.
Never thought about it until he made the comment, and I don't know if he was serious or not, but just
I
saying.
hope that he wasn't. We'll hope. That's it for tonight.
Stuart, one other thing.
Yes.
Your newsletter, I'm glad to see that. It will be online also, right?
Yes.
On the website?
Yes.
And, okay.
It will.
Okay.
Okay. All right, thank
One item that I would like to add. I had the great opportunity today to be a part of honoring Vietnam veterans who live here in Kerrville and Kerr County. It was just a very special time. Most of these vets are in their 70s or beyond, but it was a good time to be with them.
Terrific. Great.
Okay.
Okay.
We got one other announcement. We gotta give a shout out to Vincent here. Yeah, we do. He's in the play Witness for the Prosecution at the VK Garage. You're gonna have to tell us when the schedule is.
Friday, Saturday this weekend, 7:30. Sunday, I believe, is at 2:30, and then Friday, Saturday, and Sunday the next weekend, and that'll be the last time.
So there you go.
He's pretty good, I gotta tell you. We saw him.
That's what the mustache is for. I'm a British policeman.
He really gets into character.
All right. Okay. We now have a report to the council with regard to flood damages, and the city manager will introduce that.
So we have Chief Smith and Mr. Hoppy that'll present some information.
Okay.
Okay, Mayor, members of council, I want to take this opportunity to just recap a regional flooding event we had last week that impacted our city. The slide you have in front of you was taken from the National Weather Service. It shows a 10-day estimated rainfall for Kerrville and the surrounding area. If you notice from the color codes, in this area, the city of Kerrville and the surrounding area, we received anywhere approximately 6 to 15 inches of rainfall. The next slides just show some photos of the various locations around the city. You can see in the photos you have in front of you, Louis Hayes Park. These are some additional shots taken of Louis Hayes Park. I would focus you in on to pay specific attention to the top right-hand corner, the stage area. You can see the magnitude of the water in the park at that particular time. Once again, Louis Hayes Park, additional shots. This slide here is taken from our HAS photos of the various boat ramps around the city at the different parks, Cypress Park and Knapp Park. This photo here was taken by a drone above the Loop 534 bridge. And if you look in the backdrop, it provides you a view of the Shriner State Park. Nimitz Lake, you can see significant flow that's coming across Nimitz Lake at that particular time. And throughout the flood event, there were numerous city departments that maintained a heightened state of alert. We closed various parks, streets, bridges throughout the event, but we're only required to perform one water rescue. And this photo is at Morris and Town Creek. I apologize for the quality of it, but if you can notice the yellow in the photo next to the car, that's actually Kerrville firefighters performing the rescue. It was the only water rescue we had to do in this event.
That's good.
About 5 minutes after we got the victim to safety, that vehicle actually washed downstream. This information was given to us by the National Weather Service, their calculation. They projected the Guadalupe River crested at 17 to 18 feet, and during its peak, it flowed approximately 50 to 51,000 cubic feet per second. And I think at this time, Mr. Hoppy is going to just kind of cover the impact of the damages with you.
Thanks, Chief. Certainly, you've seen crews out probably out and around town really since the waters have begun to recede. Huge kudos to our staff. We'll talk about that a little bit later, but main mode right now has been debris removal, getting things back online, getting our public facilities back online and operational to the best of our ability, and then assessing what damages we have seen, which is really the phase that we're in right now, which is in the assessment phase. I'll go through, you can kind of compare and contrast some of the flood images from last week to some of the assessments that we had as late as yesterday and today. So these are pretty fresh images. You can see here, this is the boardwalk pavilion across from Louise Hayes Park. We had some railing damage along some of the ADA railing and steps. This is some of the Louise Hayes Park damage. As you can see, some of our concrete infrastructure was damaged. Entire chunks that were picked up off of sidewalk pieces and other pieces of infrastructure. Top right corner, you can see that's an actual piece of concrete that was removed, offset from the dam. Really wasn't part of the dam infrastructure necessarily, but was adjacent to it. Some cracking that occurred in some of that infrastructure as well. This is the bridge that connects Louise Hayes Park over Tranquility Island and then over to the library footbridge. You can see on the far left is a picture of all of the debris that was initiated onto that bridge. We had staff has been feverishly removing that over the course of last week. You can see the picture in the middle is with the debris removed, but unfortunately we lost several of the wood railing that has been installed there for some time. Picture on the far right, it's almost unrecognizable. It's actually the monumentation sign that's on Tranquility Island, and had a piece of debris hit that so hard that it cracked that rock, flipped that rock actually up and over the monument sign. Again, Louise Hayes Park and the splash pad fountain, which is inoperable at this time, or if it will ever stop raining, we will let that dry out and actually test that system. We've got potentially some pump issues there and some nozzle issues, certainly with the sediment that flowed over that, but certainly we're going to have had landscaping damage and quite possibly irrigation damage as well. Again, Louise Hayes Park and some of the island areas that weren't necessarily landscaped, but lost some crushed granite and some other elements there. This is G Street Bridge, and certainly the river trail. You can see on the very far left, just the edge of it there. We lost quite a bit of the riprap rock that was installed next to it, and you can see the cypress tree from underneath, and then certainly gives you a good comparison how big that tree was that hit that with that truck behind it there. Very, very sizable. We're in the process of getting a quote to remove that piece of infrastructure. It's going to take a crane to remove that. This is the reuse distribution bridge that was recently installed as part of the distribution contract. You can see really on the bottom left, that infrastructure on the south side was for the most part intact, but as it crossed over to the north side, which has the natural current stream on that northern part of the bridge, or the northern part of that river, took out the bridge and essentially laid it over into the water. You can see quite a bit of debris stacked up and actually split across that.
Have we determined that? So the pipes are in the water, they didn't like break off and wash down?
To our knowledge right now, they're in the water right there. It's going to probably take a dive team to fully assess if all of the pieces are right there or not. But as far as we can tell, right now they're laying right there. This is River Trail West, which also was right in the middle of construction process. You can see the part that's kind of in the middle between Lowry and the Dietert Center. We had quite a bit of debris and gravel that washed out onto the trail itself. You can see the opposite effect further towards the Dietert Center. There's quite a bit of scouring that occurred. But you can see actually the way that these were constructed, they had a 36-inch toe down that went down into the gravel beds. And so we actually did not see any river trail damage to any of the actual concrete facilities throughout. And I think that's a real testament to both our contractors and our design specs and our engineering on this. It's really the first time we've had a flood test of the river trail, and we think it performed very successfully. This is Guadalupe Park, and actually really more of the drainage facilities right next to Guadalupe Park. Not damage to the facility itself, but certainly on some of the railing and kind of security fencing that we had there. That one in the middle, I wanted to show that. That's actually Nimitz Lake in the background, but that's actually the river gauge that got washed out of there. So it may still be up on the GBR area website. It showed a very, very high spike as the event was occurring, but in reality, we lost the gauge, and so that's why it showed such a high spike. It wasn't accurately reading during the event. And just, in finality, just a huge, expression of gratitude for our staff. They were out there during the event in the middle of the night while all the rest of us were, cozy in our beds. They were out there closing down roads, assessing flood, watching it come up, and then, as it was coming back down, they're out there clearing debris and really hustling over the course of this last week. Certainly with the rescues that Chief talked about earlier, with our public safety personnel that were closing down roads and making sure people were rescued, but also our parks and streets and public works staff for a lot of the aftermath and closing down roads hand in hand with our public safety folks. I got to talk about that middle picture. We had a beached catfish that got out in the middle of Tranquility Island, and so as staff found that, we were able to relocate them safely. He was alive still, and so he's out there swimming, I think, in the river right now. So, and just a lot of gratitude, that a lot of thankfulness that we were not further hit. Certainly you saw the news stories in Junction and Lake LBJ and other areas, and that and that we've had things like a diverse water source. We've been able to push over to well water here over this last week because of the foresight of our forefathers, and not having to do boil water notices like Austin has. So just a lot of gratitude and thankfulness all the way around. So, thank you very much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you,
Thanks.
City,
Thanks.
for what you did.
EA, how did that catfish taste?
Like I said, he's swimming around.
He's swimming around.
You can still catch him, Bill.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, and I think it was just wonderful to hear that our river trail held. That's just in that kind of flooding. That's fantastic.
Yeah. We'll have other occasions to say this, but I believe the community is very appreciative of the first responders, city staff that were right out there in the middle of that. Okay, visitors, citizen forum. If you are going to speak, you need to fill out a speaker request form and give it to the city secretary over here. City council may not discuss or take any action on an item, but may place the issue on a future agenda. The number of speakers will be limited to the first 10 speakers, and each speaker is limited to 4 minutes. Okay. If we don't have anyone, then let's go to the presentations. And
well, good evening, everyone. And this is always an honor to be able to recognize our employees that have been serving us for quite some time. Let's get Patsy up here, too. Come on up, Patsy. So we understand that it takes a family and also takes a team, like the little team sitting over there against the wall, to really help somebody be successful in their jobs. And we know that's true for you as well, Roger. So let me read this. It says, for 33 years of service to the citizens of the City of Kerrville, and the city fire department. Congratulations on your service since December 3rd, 1984. And then I want to read a few other items about Roger. It's okay. Don't be nervous. So, as I mentioned, he began his career in '84. He obtained his emergency medical technician, or EMT, certification in January '87. He was promoted several times, first to driver in '88, lieutenant in '98, battalion chief in 2015, and then division chief for emergency management in 2016. Roger's got 2 associate's degrees from San Antonio College, fire science and safety engineering. And then he also has the following Texas Commission on Fire Protection certifications: a master firefighter, a master instructor, a master inspector, and a fire officer. He's also graduated from the Texas Fire Chiefs Academy and has the FEMA Advanced Professional Services or Series certification in emergency management. So from here, Roger's future endeavors include teaching for TEACS, which is Texas A&M Extension Service, and also responding to BCFS Emergency Management Response. Roger is married to his lovely Patsy wife for 34 years, and they have 1 daughter and son-in-law, Emily and Edward, and as of October 14th, 2018, he was promoted to grandpa. So let's give Roger a hand. In there.
Don't step behind me. Come on. Everybody's got to get a picture.
Okay, let's smile for the camera, Chief. Congratulations.
Just in case you're wondering what 33 years look like, I got something to show you.
I would say that's an improvement.
And I'll tell you, this picture has entry-level firefighters hiding their pictures.
Sign them up. Thank you very much. Congratulations.
Now, I would like for members of the staff and board of the Hill Country Crisis Council to please come up here. Let me read this proclamation about domestic violence awareness. Whereas domestic violence affects every person in the Texas Hill Country, either as a survivor of domestic violence or as a family member, significant other, friend, neighbor, or coworker. And whereas this year's national theme, Family Matters, personifies our commitment to serving domestic violence survivors by acknowledging, invigorating, and rededicating ourselves to the goal of eliminating domestic violence. And whereas we are working to provide quality services and assistance to domestic violence survivors, responding to emergency calls, offering shelter, counseling, and advocacy. And whereas Hill Country Crisis Council, other professionals and advocates of nonviolence have joined together with Texas Council of Family Violence to support each other in our work and to provide Kerr, Bandera, Gillespie, and Kendall counties and our citizens with a central source of information on domestic violence. And whereas, during the month of October, Hill Country Crisis Council and the Texas Council of Family Violence will be intensifying efforts to promote public understanding of family violence and increase sensitivity to victims of family violence, emphasizing the need for citizen involvement in efforts to reduce family violence through public education and changing public attitudes. Now, therefore, be it resolved, I, Bill Blackburn, Mayor of the City of Kerrville, Texas, do hereby proclaim October 2018 as Domestic Violence Awareness and Prevention Month in the City of Kerrville, and urge the appropriate recognition whereof. And it is signed by the mayor. Brent, thank you for all you do. I know something about this organization. My wife worked with them for 17 years. I've consulted with them on different things, and it's a tough job, but they do a great job. All right, thank you. All right, thank you. Now, I need to say one other thing. I want you to clap more in just a minute, but one other thing. The chairman of the board is Phyllis Ricks, just named last week Citizen of the Year. So.
Thank you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Move into the consent agenda. These items are considered together. And Ms. Brown, would you read the items into the record?
On the consent agenda are the minutes for the regular meeting of City Council held on October 9th, and Resolution 44-28, amending the City of Kerrville fee schedule by adopting a waiver for the parade permit fee and deposit for each annual Veterans Day parade.
All right, good.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion that we accept the consent agenda as presented.
All right. Okay, do we hear a second?
I'll second it.
Okay. We have a motion second. All in favor of passing the consent agenda, if you'd let me know by the raised hand. All right. And that's the end of the consent agenda. Now, we are going to move up one item. There's folks that are here especially for this, and that is the item related to the interlocal agreement with Kerr County for library and animal services. And do we have anyone to speak to that?
I'll present the item first, Mayor.
Okay.
So just an overview of the agreement that's in front of you. This has been a long time coming, lots of discussions with county commissioners, particularly Commissioner Letts, who's with us today, and I appreciate his efforts to get us to this point. We've been back and forth. We've had several court orders and lots of action by the court also to get us to this point. So I think we're finally at a point where we can present something to you with a recommendation. In the agenda bill, I hit the highlights of what I believe to be the major changes or major components of this new agreement. This is basically a renewal, but it ends up being a new agreement because there's quite a few changes of the agreement that was approved last year for the first time, where we have animal services being provided at the city, which are much needed, and then we also have library services being provided to county residents, which is working out quite well. So the first thing that this new agreement does is it provides for a 90-day termination clause, so that if either party is not working for either party, we need to make adjustments and so forth, we can do that. And with any new agreement, there's always going to be additional new things that pop up. And I know that, for example, our own animal services or control ordinance that's been on the books since 1968, we've got some tweaking to do there, and I'll talk about that in a moment. The other thing is that this agreement also affirms the 72-hour hold for animals that have been impounded. And this was done by a new court order that affirmed the 2003 court order here in October. And there's one exception to that, and that is if the county deems that they do not have the room available It's not very practical that we've got this situation where we have, health and safety issues going on at the pound because of lack of room. But I know that the county will be working hard to make sure that that's taken care of in both short term and long term. The next thing is there was an amendment per court order to make sure that our regulations are consistent with the county's regulations, particularly when it comes to impounding or restraining cats. And so the court actually amended their rules. The commissioner was very clear about the need to have consistent rules applied countywide and not have two sets of rules that was confusing for the officers and the operations. So they now basically with their court order mirror essentially our requirement that cats do not have to be restrained and that they're not going to pick them up and impound them as strays. There may be instances where they need to be picked up because of a rabies situation or a health hazard and that sort of thing, but not just at the course of their regular duties. It also affirms that the existing facility will be staffed 7 days per week, and then there will be different hours that will be on call versus an actual officer there. We have given the county their own flexibility to man the office as they see fit because we're not operating the center, they are. It's their budget, not our budget. But we will have some oversight responsibility with regard to a new appointee on their advisory board that you all will make if this agreement's approved later on after we make a call for applications, which would be my recommendation. It also affirms that the animal control facility will be open to the public during hours determined by the county. I think the county's got a long way to extending their hours now. They're hiring a new position to help with adoptions. They've set up an advisory board. They've now amended their rules that cats don't have to be restrained. There's a lot that's happened in the last few months, and I'm very appreciative of them working with us. So now the facility is open to the public from 8 to 5, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and then Tuesdays and Thursdays from noon to 5, and now their Saturdays hours from 9 to 11. And of course, we want them to have the ability to adjust that as new programs come online for adoption or new offerings in terms of other services that they might offer the public. It also clarifies that the county shall not be responsible for enforcing city regulations that are not expressly addressed in this new agreement. So we have a lot of regulations in our own ordinance that really we would continue to enforce as either a nuisance or some other measure. An example of that would be the number of animals that are permissible per household. We still have that regulation. That's not something that they're going to enforce. That's something that we would enforce through our code enforcement. Also things like how to detain and restrain livestock, chickens, and so forth. All that is still in our ordinance. That's not something they would be doing, but they can and they have in the past helped us to deal with those cases. As I said earlier, there's going to be a need for us to go back and review our ordinance anyway. Even if this new agreement didn't come about, our ordinance is out of date. Like any city, we have several ordinances that have been on the book for several years, and it's time to look at this one. And so we'll do that. We'll bring it back. It's a little bit of a chicken and egg thing. Which do you do first? Do you amend the ordinance, our ordinance, not knowing what the agreement's going to look like? Do you amend the agreement first and then amend your ordinance? And that's what we've chose to do, the second option. So, and again, there also, it affirms that the city may appoint 1/5 of the newly created Animal Services Advisory Committee. In your original packet, there was a typo on the numbers referenced on the court orders in the electronic version that you have online. That should be corrected. I want to give thanks to Commissioner Letts over here for his help in working through this. We went back and forth on several items. Also, to the folks here that are really supportive of animal services and advocates for animals. We met with them. I know the mayor's met with them and myself and many of you to try to listen to their concerns and incorporate as much of that as possible. I think at some point you need to get something, though, started and start working with it. And I think this is a good step in that direction. So with that, Mr. Mayor, I don't know if Commissioner Letts wants to make comments now or if you want to just go to the public for comments at this time.
Commissioner Letts, would you, and then we have at least one more. Right, okay.
I really don't. I'm here more to answer questions and clarify anything that are already questions. Do want to thank Mark. I don't know how many times we met. Many times going over words and changes and minor. Most of them are pretty minor. The cat issue was a sticking point, and it was more a matter of figuring out how to get it into the rules. Our practice has been for some time we don't pick up stray cats. I mean, we haven't been doing that in a long time, even though the rules said we could. The city ordinance said you don't, so I was trying to get those to mesh. The only area that we still, I guess, can detain cats that are is in areas of impoundment and basically in rabies control. That section we had to leave a little bit in there that if somebody calls and there's a problem with a cat on a property, we have to have the ability to catch that cat. Otherwise, we are not going to go out there and ever catch cats. Members of the public can catch stray cats and turn them into them. And that's just a matter of the public being able to do that. The Animal Advisory Committee, I think, is going to be a big help. We're modeling that after state law. City gets, the only thing that's different from state law really is that the city gets a representative on that. If we expand the board to, I guess probably 9 would be the number, something like that, you would get 2 representatives. But at that point, we're going to leave that up to the committee to see if they think the 5-member is sufficient or if they think it needs to be a larger group. And that's all I have to say. I mean, I think it's a good agreement. I think it's workable from both sides. From the standpoint of the library, it's pretty easy from your side, but getting this agreement tweaked a little bit to work with the city and work with the city ordinance took a little bit of time, and we got there.
Can I ask a question about that last part? From the county standpoint, because I've mentioned this before, do you guys see a particular need to keep the library and the animal services connected like this?
I don't know if there's a need.
Because we're not really trading services, are we?
I mean, I guess there's budget impacts to both. I mean, the city is getting the animal services, and from an efficiency standpoint, I think it certainly makes sense for in the size of our county only to have one animal control facility, which is basically it's a rabies control. If you go to Kendall County, they have 2. So I mean, it's not unique, but I think it's much more efficient from a taxpayer standpoint just to have one. And the key is to get our rules to be the same. Mark mentioned that the ordinance of the city is from '68. We're a little bit better. Our rules go back to 2003, but we're one of the tasks of the advisory committee is to look at our rules and come back with a recommendation to the commission's support of a new one. And hopefully during that process, the city will definitely be involved, and we can come up with our rules and the city ordinance being very closely tied together, at least as much as possible. I think it just makes sense. But if tying them together, there's no real reason, and there's not a financial trade-off dollar for dollar.
I just want to say, because of your efforts, I know a lot more now than I did about the burdens you have and the challenges you have. So it wasn't in vain. I know the meetings you had there were quite a few of them, but it was good. It was a healthy exercise to go through, and I really appreciate both of you and all of the volunteers with the input that you gave us and for the time you took to put this interlocal agreement together and renew it. And hopefully it'll be a good working agreement going forward. And I now know how I can volunteer and how many pets I can take home with me, my maximum amount.
And one other thing, that's another task that the advisory committee is looking at, and the county has, we've hired Peter Lewis for a number of different small projects, and one of the projects is to come up with a plan for a new facility. We don't think that facility is capable of renovation to make it really in compliance. We're looking at some other options. One of the options actually that we're looking at is the old juvenile detention facility. That structure is such that we think it could be renovated and would be a pretty good facility.
Good, nice size.
So anyway, but that may, the cost there may be cheaper to build a brand new building. But that is something that we're looking at. But that's a 2 to 3 year down the road, it looks like.
Got to start planning now, though, to have it in 2 or 3 years.
I too want to say thank you. I just appreciate, and I know you guys have spent a lot of time on this, and appreciate your coming together and working it out. And I'm delighted to see the advisory board. I think that's going to do a lot of good things for you. So, thank you.
Sure. Thank you.
All right, thanks. Okay, Shelley?
Good evening. My name is Shelley Sandy, and I reside at 3940 Oak Park Drive. As a volunteer with Hill Country Animal Advocates, our all-volunteer group has been looking closely at the interlocal agreement, not from the standpoint of the trade-off between the city library services and county rabies and animal control, but because HCAA made several requests to the county during their annual budget process. Our requests included funding for an adoption community outreach coordinator to increase adoptions, work with rescues, and engage with the public with a goal of decreasing the high euthanasia rates at Kerr County Animal Services, where the majority of impounded animals are euthanized. We also requested that the county's budget include a line item to purchase and implement software designed specifically for animal shelters, software that will quickly disseminate data on impounded animals, as well as publicizing the numerous animals available for adoption. Although we have been told these are in the county's budget for 2019, to date they have not yet been implemented. However, we were successful in our efforts in getting Animal Services public hours revised to include some Saturday morning hours, and the facility is now open during lunch for lost pet reclamation, both family-friendly changes that we hope will increase owner reclaim and adoption rates. The county is also currently in the process of forming an Animal Services Advisory Board. All of these items were initially included in an early draft of the interlocal agreement, but have since been appropriately removed from the negotiations as they were never intended to be a bartering chip. Throughout the process, Hill Country Animal Advocates also identified several discrepancies between city ordinances and those mandated by the county's court order, most notably contradictory regulations on leash laws as they pertain to cats, and the observed hold times for pet reclamation. There is no leash law applicable to city cats, while KCAS admittedly picks up off-leash cats within the city limits based on the court order. And although the court order stated a minimum 72-hour hold time, Animal Services operationally observed only a 48-hour hold time, a clear violation of the court order. As primary negotiator for the interlocal agreement, these discrepancies were brought to the attention of the city manager, Mark McDaniel, and subsequently to several members of council. We are pleased to say that the county has made changes to the court order, which will now allow cats to roam off-leash, as many residents have cats that live both indoors and outside. The county will also now hold strays for 72 hours if the facility is not at capacity, but no less than 48 hours. Still less significant discrepancies exist, but it is Hill Country Animal Advocates' understanding that the city will be tasked with reviewing the city ordinances in the near-term future. However, the interlocal agreement nor the county court order addresses what reasonable effort, as stated in section 4.3b of the court order, will be made by Kerr County Animal Services to reunite lost animals with owners or to find adoptees for surrendered animals. Animal Services currently uses Facebook to publicize only a small percentage of the thousands of animals impounded there annually. This is unacceptable, especially in this age of the internet and social media, which allows widespread and immediate dissemination of information. In this case, the dogs and cats impounded at KCAS. They continue to state they post all animals, but this is simply not the case, and there's no accountability to do so. It would seem that a reasonable person searching for a lost pet would look at KCAS's Facebook page, and if their pet is not posted, would logically assume their pet has not been impounded. Sadly, their pet may be one of the many not publicized or posted as found, one that remains unclaimed and is ultimately euthanized. Accordingly, HCAA believes that the court order must clearly state what reasonable efforts will be made by Kerr County Animal Services before an animal is deemed as unclaimed and becomes county property, at which time a lost pet can be adopted to a new owner or worse yet, euthanized. There must be a defined process in place that applies to all animals and one that holds the county accountable when not followed. Thank you.
All right, okay, thank you, thank you. Do you have any other speakers to this issue?
I've got a question and kind of a request. Mark, are we doing anything to help advertise for adoptions on the city website and social media? And can we, if we're not doing something, can we do that?
We would consider that, but I'd want to, again, they're the ones that the county operates it. They'll have an advisory board. We could look at what the possibilities are and working together to make sure that we're trying to do as much as possible.
I think we should. I think that's a good avenue.
But I'm not saying it can be done, but we'd be happy to look at it.
Okay.
I'm just curious how successful is Facebook, because I'm not even a regular user and I get a lot of information. I was just wondering if you see it working, or a little bit percentage-wise, or not that you want to rely on just that, but
I don't think Facebook is very good. It's very good. That's one of the reasons that we did look at software and have authorized the purchase of it. It's in the process right now of being purchased. I mean, it's our budgets. We can't do anything until October 1, like you all. So we're in the new budget period, and we are looking at acquiring that software. It goes through our IT department, and there's a little bit of, it's not like we just go to the store and buy it.
right.
So it has to fit in with our overall computer system, but that's in the works. Hopefully, and the software, the reason we went with what we did is that it will give us the ability to post pictures very quickly. We're much more inclined to use Facebook in the future as informational, to get information out to the public, to post things, educational type things, but we really plan to use our website with the new software to post the animals.
Okay, so if we post it on the website, that's, if we've
Which
lost
is-
a pet, we
yeah.
can go to that website.
And that, to me, would be the logical place to do it. And the city could, I think, easily put a link just to
Right.
that to the website, on their website. So, to me, to answer your original question, Facebook is not very good.
Okay.
It's a good way to get information out there, but it's not good just for
Right.
pet
Just I was
stuff.
thinking electronically, really, more than whether it's Facebook or website. If it's, if it works. I would use it. I just don't know if everybody else would, but it's certainly worth trying to have something like that.
And this the comment of Ms. Sandy about wants us to define reasonableness. I think that's very difficult to do. There has to be a certain amount of trust that we're trying to do things and make it better. I think the county has gone a long, long ways to really try to improve things. We are a kill facility. That's unfortunate. We would like not to be a kill facility, but we don't have the luxury of turning down surrenders. People come out to us that are irresponsible people and have pets for whatever reason, and they drop them off, and we have no choice as to take them. If you're a nonprofit or a shelter, you can say yes and no to a pet. We don't have that flexibility, so we get the least desirable for adoption animals are dropped off with us frequently, and that's very unfortunate. And people don't want to, if they have a real old dog that has some problem, they may not want to take it to spend their own money, so they'll just give it to the county. So we have to do something with it. It's unfortunate, but a lot of it goes back to, I think, education of the public and trying to really explain to people, what it means they need to get their dogs spayed and neutered. Another thing is that we will at some point really start focusing on is pet registration. I would imagine if I was to ask if every pet of owners in this room are registered right now, I'd bet there's a pretty good percentage that are not.
No, the city people, we all do that.
That's a Class C misdemeanor to not register your pet, but something that we don't go out and look for people for that.
Right.
But it is part of rabies control, and that is our primary function is rabies control. We've done very effective in that area. George, you may.
Thank you. Ms. Bechtel, do you have any word for us in regard to the library and the interlocal agreement? I'm putting you on the spot. She is the director of the library.
Yes, it's going very well. We continue to see an increase in the number of Kerr County residents who are coming to use the library each month. So we're very excited to see that turnout from all residents.
Okay, good. Matter of fact, if you look at their numbers are up. adults, children, those in the county.
Especially
Total
during the
numbers.
rain.
Yeah. Okay, do I hear a motion in
Now,
regard
hang
to
on one
this?
second, please. I got a couple more points on the animal control side of this interlocal. They touched on a couple of the issues that are the conflicting issues between what the city has and the county has. One is that hold time. The other is actually this notion of ownership, removal of ownership of your pet. In the city ordinances, if the animal is vaccinated, there's no provision for actually taking ownership of the animal. It just says that they'll confine it for 72 hours and they will actively pursue looking for him. But it actually explicitly says if it's an unvaccinated animal that you could euthanize it, dispose of it. So that's a conflict that still exists. It's kind of a problematic one because if you don't address that transfer of ownership, if the mayor has an animal that I just don't like, but he's kept it up to speed on all its regulations and everything else, I can pick his dog up out of his yard, take it over to animal control, surrender it. If I've taken the tags off, they won't know there's an owner, and in 48 hours, your dog could be lost. And you may not know about it. So that to me is a problem that isn't fully addressed in what we're doing. The 72-hour hold time is another issue that's negotiable, but again, it gets down to the difference between when am I actually ceding ownership of my animal and when should I reasonably be expected to find it. If the county is kind of stepping up the advertisement of every single animal that comes in, that would be a step in the right direction as far as that goes. And then we'd have to advertise big time, not just that we're going to look into it, but the city needs to jump on board with getting the information out, whether it's through our website or somewhere else, some other thing. We owe it to our pet owners to actually tell them where their pet is. The state doesn't have a minimum hold time. We're one of the states that doesn't have one, so the localities get to apply that. But the bigger problem, the city manager talked about chicken or egg. Modify the interlocal before the ordinances. I'm not convinced. I mean, to adopt the interlocal as it stands right now, it has some implied ordinance changes that are occurring, and I believe that, our charter says we can't modify our ordinances without two readings. I would suggest that if we adopt this thing tonight, that technically it wouldn't go into effect until we've modified our ordinances so that these remaining conflicts are addressed. I'm not sure how we would do it otherwise, other than hold off adopting it.
Operationally, they're already doing all these things. So whether we amend this agreement or not, they're already doing it. So there's no point in waiting until they're already doing it.
Okay, well, what that says is that our ordinances are just suggestions, and so I would argue that that's not actually the way we should run our city. So we have ordinances in place that we now are aware are going to be essentially modified by this interlocal. We're not suggesting that we don't adopt the interlocal ever. I'm suggesting that our charter says we don't modify ordinances without two readings. So is there a harm to actually holding two readings to modify the ordinances that we so choose to modify and move forward with that? That's basically.
Okay, Mr. McDaniel, do you want to?
I've already mentioned that we're going to modify the ordinances, so we'll be moving forward with that. It won't be overnight because we have a lot of review to do with the ordinances. And you also heard the commissioner mention that there may be some other things that the advisory board comes up with that would also warrant some changes to our ordinances. Mm-hmm. So our recommendation, staff's recommendation, is to approve the interlocal agreement as presented, and then we'll go to work on a schedule to try to get the ordinance updated.
Okay, all right.
I would make a motion that we actually table the adoption of the interlocal and move forward with actually modifying our ordinances as our charter accepts. so that we stay in compliance with our charter.
Is there a second? Okay. If not, is there a motion that we adopt?
I got one question. So if we adopt it tonight, what's the process to get those ordinances? We already know what the ordinances have changed. Are we going to do that next meeting, or is this going to take?
No, it'll take a while, as I mentioned, because we want to look at, the state law has changed quite a bit since our ordinance was, put into place. And then again, we expect that there will be some things that the advisory committee that will be appointed will have some recommendations to make as far as any changes. I'd say probably within the next 6 months, you would see an ordinance.
Mr. Hayes,
That's a little long.
Mr. Hayes, what's the binding effect of our charter on 2 readings of an ordinance? Do we need to do that, or do we just?
Well, let me be clear. I think your question really is this changing our code? And it's not.
Enacting it would be.
No, I disagree with that.
Okay.
Okay, do I hear a motion in regard to the interlocal agreement?
I'll make a motion that we authorize the mayor to execute a new interlocal agreement with Kerr County for the library and animal services. And if I could add that we, within a 6-month period, would review the ordinances accordingly.
Okay, all right.
I'll
Do I hear a
second
second? Okay.
Yes.
Got a motion and a second. All in favor of the passing the interlocal agreement, if you let me know by the raised hand. All right, and it is 4-1. But before we go
All
further,
opposed?
yeah, all
Okay.
opposed. There you go.
Thank you.
Before we go further, I need to clear up something, Mr. Broody.
I don't know if you have a pet, so I'm not stealing your pet.
No,
I
no, I
suggest
have.
you keep it locked up.
I have 2 rescue dachshunds, Zoe and Buddy. Which one you don't like?
I don't.
They're very cute. Okay, let's move to 5A, ordinance, first reading. And Ms. Brown, if you'll read that for us.
Ordinance number 2018-32, amending Chapter 2, Administration, Article 4, Boards and Commissions of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Kerrville, Texas, by adding a new Section 2-91 to create a Senior Services Advisory Committee, providing the functions of said committee, containing a cumulative clause, containing a savings and severability clause, and providing other matters related to this subject.
Okay, thank you. I would like to speak to that since I have been involved in this. This is the idea of our involving a group, the Senior Services Advisory Committee, that would help the city look at how we serve seniors, some specific things in that regard, but also how we utilize the resources of seniors in this community, the particular gifts, experience that they represent. And so that's what this is really about. Okay. Any questions or comments?
I got some questions.
Okay.
How are we doing the appointments? Is council members get to have certain appointments to create it, or are we going to do all at once?
We're going to do all at once.
All at once.
Yeah.
And was there a reason why we wouldn't extend this into the ETJ?
That's interesting, and that has come up. Personally, I would think that would be an option, but I'm going to ask city attorney, city manager.
It's up to the council, but I would say in most cases, your boards and commissions that are advising you on city policy, not county-related policy or ETJ-related policy, they're residents because they're paying city taxes, and you're representing them. You're not representing county people that live in the county.
Okay. And a lot of people who live in the county use our city, so I wouldn't see a harm with at least allowing a couple of them from the ETJ.
Okay.
And are we going to do staggered terms? Like
Yes.
most boards, okay.
Mm-hmm.
And just the last one, any particular issues that have come up or goals that we're trying to meet?
The primary goals are better awareness of services needed related to seniors, and we think typically of the very resourceful seniors. We've got a lot of seniors that, use city services because there's a real need there. So that'd be across the board. Beyond that, in terms of trying to identify individuals who are seniors in our community that could help, and this may be where some folks from the ETJ come in, that these individuals could help us look at issues related to a particular thing. I think water's one, transportation may be another. We've got some very significant folks that have expertise in economic development. So, be a number of different things.
Okay. Well, with that said, I'd like, if we could add a change or add something to it, I'd like to add maybe at least 2 members that are allowed from the ETJ. They don't have to be required to be in the ETJ, but we could extend.
I think, given what the city manager said, we're probably better not to do that, so that it's serving the city, related to the city, so they live in the city. But what I'm saying is that I anticipate, as we look at resources and so forth that can be of help in different areas, we could easily look at the ETJ.
Okay, just a suggestion.
Okay.
I think it sounds like a great idea. We'll get a lot of good information, so I think it's super.
Yeah, great. Okay.
I think it's a good idea. He asked about, Vincent asked about the staggered terms. It's not actually worded that way. And so it's set up to actually everybody that we appoint initially ends in October of 2019, and then from there, they're 2-year terms. I'd like to say we somehow pick half of them are expiring in 2019 and half are expiring in 2020, something like that.
Okay.
So that they'll be staggered.
Okay.
The other is more of a procedural question. Is there a reason why we're adding this board to the charter or whatever we're doing instead of the code? As opposed to other boards? I mean,
Well, the only reason I thought about is this is what I'd prefer to do from now on. It's kind of been a change of heart of mine, and
Okay.
so I wouldn't suggest we go back and.
so it's the first of many type of thing?
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
as we go, if we go to amend any more boards, I would suggest we put those into the
Okay,
code.
fair enough. And then this is just a question. I guess this is for the mayor. Again, other boards council selects the members, and then the membership selects their chair and vice chair. So is there a reason why you set it up? It kind of looks like you set it up so that the mayor from here on out determines who the chair and vice chair are. Is that what you intended, or what,
No.
what are we doing here?
No.
What did you intend, I guess?
Well, didn't intend for the mayor to appoint from here on out.
Would
So-
you be okay with having the members, we vote for membership and have the members, whoever get voted, selecting their chair and vice chair, and kind of the way the other boards do it?
Yeah.
So anyways, that would be my only, so that would be a modification, I guess, to the
Okay.
setup, but that's it.
All right. Is there a motion regarding the Senior Advisory Committee?
I would make a motion that we pass the ordinance 2018-32 with, I'm asking this, but the two amendments. One, to make sure that it is staggered terms, so just half of them are expiring in a year and the other half are 2 years. And then the other, just, I guess, remove the part about the vice chair and chair being selected by the mayor. So that's my motion, I guess.
Could
Right.
they not say after the first, that he does the initial appointment?
I'm actually, I mean, that's what I was asking about. I'm suggesting that there's really no reason to do that, first or future, but.
Well, I think it is good the first time around, and then after that, you have the group
That's
making a
fine.
choice.
I mean, however, it's gotta be worded to have the mayor selected the first time.
Okay, all right.
I'll second that with having the mayor appoint the first time, but from there on out, the committee would appoint.
All right. Okay, we've got a motion and second.
Yeah.
Okay.
Judy seconded.
All right. And all in favor, if you'd let it be known by the raised hand. All right. I don't think any of us would want to go on record in Kerrville, voting against senior adults. So, okay. Okay, 6A, Ms. Brown.
Ordinance number 2018-25, annexing an approximate 5.335 acre tract of land out of the William Watt Survey, number 65, abstract number 364, into the corporate limits of the City of Kerrville, Texas. Said tract being located within Kerr County, Texas, and the extraterritorial jurisdiction of the City of Kerrville, Texas, and generally located adjacent to property within the Comanche Trace residential subdivision, which is located along State Highway 173, further describing the property to be annexed, adopting a service plan for the property annexed, establishing the zoning for the property annexed, and making findings.
All right, Mr. Paxton.
Thank you, Mayor. This is the fifth time that we've talked about this between the petition, public hearings, and ordinance readings. No changes on our part. We did send out some information this afternoon regarding other donut holes. I know that was a concern for this particular annexation. It is not necessarily uncommon, although it's one thing we try to resolve. We have talked with Comanche Trace, and they are looking to include this donut hole in their next annexation process, roughly within the next year or so.
Would you explain what a donut hole is and why it's a problem?
Yeah, yes. In this case, we are an area of the county unincorporated into the city, surrounded by incorporated city limits. So it would be an area that would not be served by the city, surrounded by the city. The benefit in this case is that there is no intended purpose for this area except for open space. So it would not be a developed piece of property that would or would not be getting city services.
Okay. Do you have any questions?
Yeah, go ahead and explain to us what 43057 is in relation to our ordinance and what he just asked.
Excuse me, 43057?
Yeah, the was it the Texas Local Government Code that we reference in our ordinance?
I don't have that in front of me.
Okay, I'm sorry.
It's right there. That's the language. I just
Right.
pasted
So,
It says the city has to find a public interest. I guess what public interest are we finding? Is that what you're?
yeah, basically, I mean, the government code states that it's a requirement that we have to make a finding that there's a public interest in leaving that donut hole. We reference it in the ordinance because it's a requirement. So I guess it begs the question: what's the public interest that we're citing or finding when we do this? What's the public interest in leaving this donut hole?
In this case, the annexation was processed through a development agreement that was approved in 1999. As those processes have come in, those preliminary plats have come in as a petition for annexation, council takes action on that moving forward. In this case, it does create a donut hole for private open space for Comanche Trace development that the city would not have any services to anyway. So there is no services that are lacking in that area.
I would add to that traditionally the city's really never done annexation. I'm sure there's probably some exceptions, except for voluntary annexation, right? So in this case, it's a voluntary annexation. They did not include this in their application. So for us to force the issue, we'd be doing involuntary annexations. And by policy, just by practice, we've not really done that. So for us to do it, the public interest is we'd have to go out there and spend money to process and put into play a annexation application at our expense, the hearings, the publications, and so forth. So the public interest in this case is not to spend the public's money, especially in this case where it's common area, and especially in this case where we've got a follow-on application that's coming to us for the next annexation of Comanche Trace.
Well, we don't know that it's common area. They can tell us that, but we don't know that. They can tell us we're going to annex this in a year, but we don't know that. Do we?
Well, actually, because my time's ticking away, to respond to that, basically the way to have handled the public interest would have been to tell us about this particular state law requiring it at the time at which we were asked about the petition, and we would have said no to the petition and asked them to add it to it, and it wouldn't have cost us anything. Basically, doing it the way we've done it, we've boxed ourselves into a position where it might cost us money to do it involuntary, when we could have solved it by addressing this when P&Z raised it in April. We could have been addressing it at that stage. Instead, they weren't even informed of this, and it seems a little bit preposterous to think that our public interest is being served by boxing us into something. We had the ability, development agreement or not, to have just said to them, this annexation is leaving a donut hole. Law says we got to cite a public interest. There isn't one, so either add it into your annexation of petition or don't annex any of it, which they would have just added it in. We're talking about 2 acres or something like that. So I don't know that we've actually cited cited an answer to the required public interest question.
Can I ask a question? When you say Comanche Trace is agreeable to including this donut hole, does that mean they've said something in writing to that effect?
No, I've talked with the manager. They do have plans for an annexation in the near future, depending upon what their market is throughout the next year.
Right.
They are willing to include that in there.
And isn't it something that maybe we're worrying too much about? They've told us they're going to do that. They've been good about everything that they've done out there.
Well, they try not to create these donut holes, and we're allowing this one. So the next guy that wants to try to do this, we're going to tell him no, because why?
Right, it turns into subjective enforcement, is what you just described. Because Comanche Trace is a good customer, and they are. Nobody's saying otherwise.
Now, Councilmember Broody, I'm going to have to just sorry to interrupt, but that's a legal term, and that's a
which one?
Subjective enforcement, and to suggest that that's what was happening here.
No, it's what she just
described.
described.
No, I know, but you mentioned it. No, you mentioned it. You're implying that the city's going through some sort of subjective enforcement, and just stop. Just let me finish.
I am.
You're explaining that that's what may be occurring here, and I'm telling you that's not what's occurring. Mr. McDaniel is correct. In the past, developers have created these because we've never been in the process since I've been here for 18 years where we've gone out and annexed things involuntarily. So we've allowed developers, right, wrong, or indifferent, to create donut holes. I think you got a list of that today. That's going on here. I tend to agree. I think this is much ado about nothing. This will be a space that won't cause the city any sort of concern, shouldn't cause the developer any sort of concern. Now, I think from a planning perspective, the developer's going to want it in because it's in the middle of his development.
Right.
And I think it makes sense, and you've heard tonight that he plans to do that. So I think this is, you've heard the public interest. I would go beyond that. I think the public interest is not only saving money, I don't think there's any harm really in creating a donut in this situation. There's no sort of ownership interest or issue. There's no sort of downplay to providing utilities or anything like that or future planning. So I just disagree with the assessment that this is some sort of subjective enforcement.
Okay, well, first off, I didn't assess what the city's doing as subjective enforcement. The example that she just provided is the one I was addressing. So that's problem number one. The second is whether we've done something in the past is not a good enough reason to do something wrong in the future. We have a Texas local, and it's my turn to finish. We have a Texas local government code that says we have to find a public interest. We have to cite that. And so we aren't doing that. We didn't even ask about it. It's in the ordinance, but we didn't actually say what it was. And now we're saying that the public interest is that to essentially allow this particular developer, we don't know what we're going to do on any other because the law says that we're not supposed to do this way. And as far as what we're losing, this may be a small 2-acre lot, but if it was annexed, we'd be collecting taxes on it. If we don't annex it, we're not. I understand they likely will annex within the year. That's all great. But what's the harm in actually taking it back to April and fixing our processes so we don't get ourselves in this box in the future? I don't want to, it may be much ado about nothing now, but at some point we've got to address these process flaws that are in our system, and this is a place to draw that line and start. Just like you do the board in the charter, because you're starting from here on out, not saying anything prior was bad. You're making a decision that it seems better this way. So rather than continue in this problem, why wouldn't we fix it?
I don't think there's anything.
I'm done. Don't worry about it.
I think there's nothing in the law that says you all need to make a specific finding. If you adopt this ordinance, which on second reading, you all will have made that finding, and you might not make that finding. I fully get that, but that's what the ordinance will do. The ordinance, the state law doesn't say you have to make a specific finding and you need to set that out.
No, you have to make a finding of public interest.
Right, and I think you've heard enough about the public interest that I assume that the motion will take that into account, and certainly the ordinance does as well.
Okay. All right. What is your pleasure on this matter? Do I hear a motion?
I would make a motion that we adopt ordinance number 2018-25, annexing an approximate 5.335 acre tract into the corporate limits of the city of Kerrville.
All right. Okay.
I'll second it.
All right. We've got a motion and second. All in favor of that motion, if you'll raise your hand. Okay. And all in favor and all opposed by the same sign. It passes 3-2. Okay, 6B, which is again second reading. We've dealt with this before. Ms. Brown, would you read that for us?
Ordinance number 2018-26, annexing an approximate 3.669 acre tract of land out of the J.D. Level Survey number 1862, abstract number 1435, into the corporate limits of the city of Kerrville, Texas, said tract being located within Kerr County, Texas, and the extraterritorial jurisdiction of the city of Kerrville, Texas, and addressed as 884 Farm to Market Road 783 Harper Road, further describing the property to be annexed, adopting a service plan for the property annexed, and establishing the zoning for the property annexed.
Mr. Paxton, do you have a comment on this?
No comments, no changes, and just here to answer your questions.
All right. Okay.
I'd make a motion that we pass ordinance 2018-26 on second reading.
All right.
I'll second.
A motion second. All in favor of that ordinance number 2018-26, raise the hand. 5-0, it passes. We go to 6C, and if you would read that for us.
Ordinance number 2018-27, annexing an approximate .885 acre tract of land, a portion being out of the Jesus Hernandez Survey number 548, abstract number 189, and another part being out of MK and TERY Company Survey number 1862, abstract number 1435, into the corporate limits of the city of Kerrville, Texas, said tract being located within Kerr County, Texas, and the extraterritorial jurisdiction of the city of Kerrville, Texas, and addressed as 874 Farm to Market Road 783 Harper Road, further describing the property to be annexed, adopting a service plan for the property annexed, and establishing the zoning for the property annexed.
All right. Any word? No comment? Okay. Again, second reading. Any question?
I'd make a motion that we pass 2018-27 on second reading.
All right. There is a motion. Is there a second? Ms. Eichner? Okay. All right. All in favor of ordinance number 2018-27, if you'd let it be known with a raised hand. Okay. And it passes unanimously. Okay. 6D, and this is another one we just talked about. If you'll read it for us.
Ordinance number 2018-23, annexing an approximate 58.74 acre tract of land out of the Joseph S. Anderson Survey number 141, abstract number 2, and the J.S. Sater 142, abstract number 290, into the corporate limits of the city of Kerrville, Texas, said tract being located within Kerr County, Texas, and the extraterritorial jurisdiction of the city of Kerrville, Texas, and addressed as 1515 Knapp Road South, further describing the property to be annexed, adopting a service plan for the property annexed, and establishing the zoning for the property annexed.
All right, again, we have talked about this one. This is second reading. No staff comment. Okay. Any questions?
I've got one comment, Mayor, or a question, kind of. I'd just like the city move forward with providing sewer services to this area, following the waste and water master plan as close as we can. I know it's pretty vague, but it shows kind of using gravity along there, which will better service the whole area in the long run. Also, if the city can work with the county on the Knapp Road abandonment, just some kind of record showing that we have it now and they don't. And I think it's a great project. I'm not trying to get in the way of it, just trying to plan for the future.
Okay.
I'd go ahead and make a motion to pass 2018-23 on second reading.
All right. We got a motion. Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Second, Ms. Eichner. Okay. On ordinance 2018-23, all in favor, raise your hand. Okay. And then 6E, if you read that for us.
Ordinance number 2018-28, amending the city's zoning code by changing the zoning district for an approximate 0.28 acre tract of land, said tract being part of a 7.964 acre tract, generally located in the 300 block of Holsworth Drive, north of the intersection of Holsworth Drive and Norfolk Lane, and within the City of Kerrville, Kerr County, Texas, by removing the area from a residential cluster district, RC, and placing it within the 24-N zoning district, containing a cumulative clause, containing a savings and severability clause, providing for a maximum penalty or fine of $2,000, ordering publication, and providing other matters related to the subject.
Okay. Mr. Paxton?
No comments?
No comment. All right. Okay. Any questions or comments?
I have one question, Mayor. When will property be subdivided?
That's part of their next step.
Okay.
We have received signed and sealed meets and bounds from the surveyor. Their next step is going to be working on subdivision plat and finalizing the building permit and design. They've got some preliminary sketches. I think council's seen those that they're looking at for the structure. Again, the 24N zoning does require compatibility to the adjacent area, so they'll be reviewing that through the design of the building and the permitting process.
Okay.
So I do not have an exact timeline, but that is their next step for the development.
Okay. I talked to Mark about this a little bit earlier, talked to consultants about the process of rezoning and subdividing and what comes first kind of thing, and maybe we can look into that going forward.
I had actually talked to the new owners about the possibility of adding maybe some stone to the bottom of the building that would keep it in touch with the other with all the garden homes that are on Holsworth Drive, and with something that Louis said he was open to, and I'd love to have him pursue that, look at that as they do their design. I think that would be great.
All right, do I hear a motion?
I'll make a motion to pass 2018-28 on second reading.
All right, good, okay.
I'll second.
All right, Ms. Eichner seconds. All right, all in favor of this ordinance number 2018-28, raise the hand. Okay. Congratulations, Louis, it's moving along. Okay, 6F, ordinance 2018-29, Ms. Brown?
Ordinance number 2018-29, authorizing the city manager to execute a special warranty deed for an approximate 0.078 acre tract of land out of the B.F. Cage Survey number 116, abstract number 106, within the City of Kerrville, Kerr County, Texas. Said property consists of part of the City Hall site located at 701 Main Street, State Highway 27, authorizing the city manager to take other reasonable and necessary action to convey the property, including the authority to execute a release and termination agreement concerning said property, making such authority contingent upon the conveyance of properties to the city and the city's acceptance thereof, repealing conflicting ordinances, providing for severability, and declaring an effective date.
Okay, again, another one that we have looked at. Any questions, comments on that?
I have a couple, Mayor.
Okay.
Can we kind of show the amending plat? Did you get that on there? Tried to explain this last time kind of while we got to this point.
Martin, if you could bring up the PowerPoint that shows the slide of the before and after amendment.
Just so everybody's aware, he's talking to the guy behind the wall.
Okay, it's going to be something different here.
Well, we're waiting for that. I can ask a question, right? Because it's not required to the picture. There's a reversionary clause attached to this property, is there not? Or no? Is there?
To the property where
City Hall, the building?
Yes.
Okay, so the question is the little land that we just picked up or whatever, is it attached to that too? Or how does that work? Or is it attached to it?
land that we
The land
We're
swap.
swapping land right now.
Right.
So is the swap going to be part of this, just done deal? Or
Yeah, so they'll in fact, in talking to the attorney for the Kellogg Foundation, they'll just copy and paste the reversionary language they added to the City Hall into those new deeds.
okay.
Yeah.
It'll be the same as the restrictions?
Yes.
Okay, because when I was looking for a spot for the farmer's market, I thought we had a little parking lot out here we might be able to use, but that's not allowable use. What would it take to get somebody from the city to negotiate different restrictions on the property?
Well, you can certainly.
Can we
ask.
table that and do that, or we have to start this process over?
Oh.
So
So the restrictions are not in what we're adopting, they're going to be added? Is that what you're saying?
Right, so, I think I'm gonna answer your questions, but let me know if I don't. So, we have a City Hall site that there were some restrictions on that site. So, part of that site is gonna go back to the Callows because we don't need it. And so, in doing that, giving that back to them, we're gonna actually release the restrictions for them, for their purposes. When they give us, the other pieces, I assume those will include the same restrictions as are on the City Hall site.
Okay, that's something I would like to see us try to negotiate, so we can actually use it for events or something, not restricted to just City Hall.
Like are we talking about the?
Yeah, the new,
parking
like,
area?
right, he's got a decent picture here, that parking area right there, and the stuff we're including. I don't know if we can table that, or if we have to start it all over, or, that's what I'm trying to ask, I guess, what's the process to do that?
The wording's going to be in this release termination agreement?
It will be in the deeds that they give
Oh,
us,
okay,
the other
okay.
pieces.
All right, gotcha.
Again, I don't have those deeds in front of me, but as I recall, those restrictions are gonna be virtually the same as the restrictions that are in the City Hall property.
And tabling it tonight wouldn't hurt anything, we can just pick up at the next meeting if you were able to negotiate something?
Well, I'll be honest, I dislike tabling between two readings, because I think, and the charter doesn't say you have to have two consecutive readings, but I think it's better that way, and that's certainly been our practice. I would say that if you want to make that part of your motion, that we, before accepting those deeds, that we look at those restrictions and try to, negotiate in a way that, so you're concerned that the current restrictions won't allow us to put a
Yeah,
farmer's
because when I was
market?
trying to do the farmer's market, we weren't allowed to use that parking lot for the farmer's market.
We
which
can
was
park
city-
cars there, that's it.
Yeah,
Oh,
it's
okay.
city owned, but the plaza was not an option, so we tried the parking lot, and the restrictions wouldn't allow it, so.
I mean, I'm happy to take that into
Okay.
account if that's part of the motion for this ordinance.
Do we have the as plat or amending plat, or is this all we have?
No, I'm sorry, we don't have the as platted. It's in your exhibit. This is essentially the outline of what that is.
Alright, well, you can go back to the first one, because I was trying to explain it last time, and not too many people understood. There's a small white box in the northeast corner of the yellow, and that's what was platted, showing we own that, but we didn't, so that's why we're doing what we're doing. to include that so we actually have access onto Main Street. A lot of questions have been asked what we're doing and why we're doing it. That's my that was my intentions of doing this.
Mr. Chopper, you have a response?
Essentially, again, as we explained last time, when this property was deeded over to the city, there was a footprint that was not known at that time. It was intended that, the area that was going to be deeded was very similar to what the footprint would be. That was smaller than what was originally deeded. And at the time, the access and what would be approved by TxDOT was not known. And so, again, this is, essentially a cleanup item of what was originally intended, as I understand it, and that is to generally provide access to the facility, both from a pedestrian standpoint from the clock tower, as well as from vehicular traffic from Main Street, but not to be well beyond that area, to primarily be the footprint of City Hall.
It's not, I don't know, it's kind of confusing because we do have a plat showing as platted where the entrance is. So I think we knew where it was. We were just never conveyed that property. And what we're doing now is actually getting that property that was originally as platted, just we never had ownership of it. But if you had the correct plat on there, you would see that.
Well, I can tell you that area in the orange on the far right-hand side was not deeded over to the city.
Right, but it's platted and filed.
That's right. It did get filed incorrectly. You're correct.
And that's what we're doing as a fix.
That's right. It did get surveyed and filed without a corresponding deed. Yes, sir.
But one of my questions is, if I'm understanding correctly, if you try to change, I mean, there's not much area there. So the purpose of trying to change
the restrictions?
Yes, I'm not sure that it will accomplish much.
Well, it would have helped if we would have had that. That would have been an option for the farmers market.
The whole parking lot. So he'd be what he's suggesting is the restrictions that are currently sitting on the part of the parking lot that we own prevent us from using it for anything other than parking. So he's looking to change the restrictions on the current parking lot that we own plus the little piece that we're getting. So that's what he's talking about, at least anyway.
That's my goal, is the changing of the restrictions.
Yeah. So.
And what would you want to change exactly?
Make it so we can
use
it
any way we want. Any way you want.
Any kind of events, any kind of,
You'd be talking about the farmer's market right in that area.
Before we got where we are, yes, that was an option because we got removed from the pavilion. So we're looking for other areas, and I tried this one. That's when I found the restrictions. So any other new event, we can't use it until we change the restrictions.
That's really what he's getting at, is we have no use for that except for parking. That's all we can use. We own the land, but we can only use it to put cars on.
Okay, let me back up just a minute. How would that be changed, Mr. Hayes?
Well, there'd be two processes, and it will be, I think, it'll be, of course, negotiations will be part of it, and you'll actually have to go into the deed for the original City Hall site and get them to amend the restrictions, and then, of course, when they deed us the new piece, the remainder of the parking lot and the trash area, they just would not add all those restrictions in there. But this is the first time I've heard this come up. I think I may have missed it the last meeting, and I wasn't part of the whole farmers market relocation effort. So I haven't looked at those specifically to figure out what needs to be changed. I will say, I don't know what the Callow Foundation will say or how they'll respond. I do know that they believe and like this parking for additional parking for their other spaces over here in other buildings. So,
all right, well, we can try.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, but if we pass it tonight, then we can still try to get those restrictions lifted.
We can do a second motion with direction for doing
yes,
that.
That's
what we would do.
Rudy's correct. If you give us a motion and add that language in there, what you want us to do, that would be good.
Second motion or added to the original motion?
I would do two separate, yeah. basically if we were to make a motion to pass this as is, and then on this agenda item, make a second motion to address the restrictions.
Yeah, however you want to do it. We just need clear direction.
Okay, all right. Do I hear a motion in regard to
I'll
ordinance
make a motion to
2018-29?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to pass ordinance 2018-29 as presented.
All right. Do I hear a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, second, Mr. Broody. All right, all in favor of ordinance 2018-29, if you would raise a hand, and it passes 5-0. Okay.
I'd also like to
Now,
make-
let's hear a second motion.
I'd like to make a motion to authorize the city manager and city attorney to negotiate the restrictions on the city hall property.
And if you wouldn't mind, add yourself into the discussion, since you seem to have the most.
Okay, I'll also.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Make a motion to have the city manager, city attorney negotiate the restrictions on the city hall property.
But don't you also need to include what you want to happen in those negotiations?
Not in the motion, but that's why I was suggesting.
Wouldn't this
having
just
it
be a
part of-
future agenda item, really? I mean, why does it have to be attached in any way to this
Because
transaction?
this deed is gonna get switched over pretty quick, yes?
Yes.
I assume.
Well,
But this
right,
may be
and
an
that-
ongoing issue that's,
Well, and that begs the question, so let's just play this out, that we, attempt to negotiate, and they either decline to sit down at the table, or after sitting down with us, they say they don't want to do that. Is that the end of the exercise?
Yeah, okay, but the motion is to seek.
Right.
the-
I just
the
want to understand.
Negotiations.
Yeah, I'd like to get the restrictions removed.
Okay.
Okay.
Are we clear on the motion?
Yes.
I think
Okay.
so. I'll second it.
All right, second. All in favor, let it be known by the raised hand. Okay. I just want to say, for those in attendance, it isn't always this exciting. And,
yes, it is.
but, okay. 6G, ordinance number 2018-31. Ms. Brown?
Ordinance number 2018-31, amending the budget for fiscal year 2018 to authorize the transfer of funds between different funds to account for a general fund balance and to make other amendments as provided herein.
All right, and this, we don't have a formal presentation from staff. We heard presentation last time. It has not changed. Do I hear a motion on 6G?
I'll make a motion to pass 2018-31
All right.
on second reading.
Okay,
I'll second it.
okay. And Ms. Siegerman seconds. All in favor? Raise your hand. Okay. And it passes 5-0. Then we move to 6H, ordinance number 2018-24. And Ms. Brown.
Ordinance number 2018-24, approving a project and financing plan for tax increment reinvestment zone number 1, City of Kerrville, Texas, making various findings related to such plan, providing for severability, and providing an effective date.
Okay, hang on.
I'm gonna have to repeat myself there.
Okay. All right, Mr. Pettit?
Mayor, members of council, city staff, thank you very much for the opportunity to present and answer questions pertaining to the tax increment reinvestment zone number 1 that was created. And now we're discussing the project and financing plan, and this is the second reading. I've had the pleasure of joining you guys multiple times over the past several months, including from March 16th, 2018, and also having a council briefing and a council workshop. I hope, and it takes time, but I hope that we can get close to being TIF experts, and if you don't have an answer, you feel free to pick up the phone and give me a call, and I'd be happy to answer those. But we had our second reading of the creation ordinance on September 25th. TERS board recommended approval of the project and financing plan, and we had our public hearing and first reading the project and financing plan of the ordinance. As the city manager had mentioned before, this is the two-step process of the Texas two-step. You got your creation ordinance, and then you also have your project and financing plan. So the TERS was created on September 25th, 2018. And essentially the goal of TERS number 1 is to fund needed public infrastructure and encourage private development that will yield additional tax revenue to all the taxing jurisdictions. The base year is 2018 with a 30-year term. The project and financing plan, based upon initial projections, and I think you've probably heard me say the word crystal ball a couple of times, but what we try to do is take a look at development opportunities, working with staff because they have their ear to the ground about what is happening. And we looked at potential commercial development consisting of retail, office, hotel, as well as residential development. If I can say this about project and financing plans, they are living and breathing documents. So it is very difficult to predict the future. But I think that what we've been able to come up with allows for both the TERS board and the city council the ultimate flexibility to use the state statute and what's afforded under the state statute, and what I like to say is a menu of items to fund projects, because each project is unique, and so we can't really predict what a project's going to need as it comes forward, because we're dealing with a historic area and we're also dealing with individual property owners, not just one property owner. So savings from one line item can be applied to cost increase in another line item. And so we have $17 million worth of proposed. Let me say that also we do a lot of work with amendments to project and financing plans once they mature further down the road, and we know what that first couple of years increment and new projects are going to generate. So we do that quite a bit. So by approving this plan, the statute affords that any time after the zone is adopted, which was adopted on September 25th, the board of directors may adopt an amendment to the project plan. The amendment takes effect on the approval of the change by ordinance of the city or the county that created the zone. In certain cases may require an additional public hearing, depending if you increase the amount, that would trigger another public hearing, but otherwise it's an administrative amendment for the project and financing plan ordinance. As far as moving forward, the TERS board, as we anticipate, will meet as needed to evaluate funding projects as they come forward. I know we've had some discussions about adding in the future some additional board members to get some different perspectives. We do have some contractual obligations under the state statute that on the 150th day following the end of the fiscal year, which your fiscal year ends September 30th, that you provide a report on the status of the zone as prepared. So basically, what's the base year? We know our base year is January 1 in 2018. We're going to start to get those financial reports come the end of January, and then we'll get our certified roll July 25th of 2019. So we'll know what our first year's increment is. And so when we meet, we would need to meet and discuss kind of the financial status and then any projects that have approached the staff, and that would be on an as-needed basis. But at a minimum, the TIF board will need to meet annually to discuss the annual report and the budget, and then as needed to consider funding requests. And then once again, the TIF board makes recommendations to the city council for approval. So once again, it's a two-step process. And with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
One question I have, you mentioned, say a project comes to the city staff and then the board considers that. We have a new economic development director, and so how would he come to the city? So somebody comes to him and says, we're looking at this. Would he come to the city, or is that typically what he would do?
I can tell you.
I'll take that question. So in the new business plan for KEDC, there's a chart in there that's fairly new, where it lines out the different types of economic development initiatives that are there, existing or potential. Then it also identifies who's the lead. So the city is the lead on the TERS. The city is the lead on retail development. KEDC becomes the lead on, say, primary jobs. And so working together, they'll hear about the projects. They may weigh in terms of whatever suggestions they make, but it's really the city and the TERS board. It's not, and if the county participates at some point in the TERS, they would also weigh in.
Okay, all right, okay.
And that's typical of how we see your EDCs are going after your manufacturing jobs and a lot of things that are chamber of commerce related. These are redevelopment projects and consistent with what the city would do.
Mm-hmm.
So what the city manager stated is very consistent with how TIFs are administered statewide.
Okay. Any other questions?
So can we ask if they've got, I think it's 3 slides or whatever, if they've got them up there. If they do, the one I'm looking for is the one that's titled Anticipated Development. It's got a yellow and green grid on it.
Yes.
This is just detail-oriented type questions that, I've asked them before. Nobody seems to really, care to pay attention to them, but at the same time, okay, so this is the grid I was asking about last time. And theoretically, it's showing us the year-by-year crystal ball growth, if you will, of the TERS. And it even says so in the, estimated, through the life of the TERS. But it only shows 20 years. The life of the TERS is going to be 30. So are we, just to be clear, are we making the assumption that, or are we making the guess that we're not even looking for growth in year 21 through 30, or did we just miss something there?
I think, as I had mentioned previously, it's very difficult beyond that 20 years, and we felt we had sufficient development within that first 20 years. So the 30 years will gladly take development, but once again, being assumptions on what the development's going to occur, what occurs between year 21 and year 30, based on this projection, is just the growth of those initial projects. But once again, this is a assumption on scenarios, on numbers that we don't know are going to come to fruition.
Okay,
we hope they do, and we'll certainly take those projects. But as far as getting out, it's very difficult to get past year 20 and say this is what's going to happen here. And so we've always said that we've been responsive to the marketplace, and that's why you really kind of set your base and your term.
Right. Well,
So-
my concern was based on the fact that this said the life of the TERS, and originally when we talked about the TERS, we were actually throwing out the 20-year TERS. So it seemed like it might have been just a little bit of an oversight. So if you go to the next slide, that is all the numbers that you can't read. Looks like that. I don't know who I got to yeah, that one. Okay, so this is basically the detail of the backup, I guess, if you will, of the finance plan, I assume. And so we're adopting a finance plan that I would venture a guess that nobody else here on council has tried to look at, because if you expand this, the numbers get even harder to read. They get broken apart. But what you can see on it, and this is the reason I was, I just looked at this today because I thought I could expand it. Can't look at it, so we're going to adopt something we can't see. And you notice at the bottom it says TERS number 12. So it kind of goes back to the spreadsheet problem we had earlier in this process, where just the I's weren't being dotted and the T's weren't being crossed, and it just gives me pause. So that's another, we're adopting something that we don't fully understand, let alone if we could read the numbers that we would even understand it. And then if you go to
Brody, I did provide you with an Excel sheet.
You're right. And the Excel spreadsheet that I got at the beginning of the process, if you recall, had cells that were referencing in the wrong place. And so that was the reason that it got cleaned up, I assume, but I've never been able to see that, if you remember.
I'd be happy to provide that again.
It would be nice. I hate that I have to actually bring these up. I mean, we're adopting something that we can't even read. That's not on you. I mean, we all had the opportunity to look at it, and we didn't. Could you just put up the other, I think it's the first page of the ordinance. There's another one that's a little bit. Like,
while we're waiting, could you answer the questions that have been asked, and we'll go to the next one?
With regards to?
The figures page, hard to make the figures out, et cetera.
That's just the nature of the spreadsheet. I can certainly print it out in a bigger, higher quality, but once again, it's all the city's contribution that is really driving the project cost in there. And so we have individual spreadsheets that I had shared with Mr. Brody, and he did bring up a valid point but it didn't impact the overall number, because there's a number of different individual spreadsheets, and you can get into paralysis by analysis, because you can get so deep into these spreadsheets. They all feed one major spreadsheet that kind of gives an output, and I apologize if they're too small, but we're happy to provide larger format of those. But at the end of the day, the project and financing plan is kind of setting, we're saying we've got $17 million and we've got these categories to be able to spend it. Once the project and financing plan is adopted, it's like a plan. It's got to be a living and breathing plan, because it's going to have a lot of changes. Next year, come June 25th, it's going to be updated, because we're going to know what the growth is. I made an assumption of 2%. We could have much greater growth, and none of the projects that I anticipated occurred, but some other projects did. So it's kind of a point in time, is my point. And so we have to treat it as a living, breathing document, and that's done around the state, because there's just no way to really be able to get definitive of what's going to happen over the next 30 years.
Okay, so if we can't pull up the last thing, let me just say that last thing. According to the code, financing plan must include a detailed list describing the estimated project costs. We don't really do that. The statement listing of the proposed kind, number, location of all public works, we don't do that. But to the last thing about it being a living, breathing document, yes, it should. But just like a human being, a living, breathing child is going to grow and become bigger. We don't know how they're going to grow up. But we don't start them off without an arm. We don't pull an arm off, and we're missing some information. But the last part had to do with a housekeeping thing on the ordinance. The section 1 findings, it actually says, City Council here makes the following findings of fact. The plan includes, which I assume is this project financing plan, all information required by sections 311.003 B and C. Those sections actually refer to the preliminary plan, and I think you meant to say, I think it's 311.011 that actually puts the requirements in for the project and financing plan.
Okay. Comments in that regard?
I don't have the statute in front of me.
I don't have the statute in front of me, but Mr. Brody, this is one of those issues that if you would have asked me today, I could have matched it up and could have changed it. I think it's maybe a typo.
I didn't know it till today,
okay.
A couple hours ago. So, I got a place I got to be too.
All right, let me ask you this. How many of these tours have you done around the state?
Over 120.
Over 120 of the 300 plus that have been done. So I'm going to assume you know what you're doing.
I hope so.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
For the grace of God, yes.
Well, you come highly recommended.
Thank you.
And any other questions?
No questions. I just think we need to continue. We look at it as it's going to be a nice savings account, and we don't know what's going to go into that savings account, but that's part of the exciting part about it, that it's there to be put in when the time comes. So I think that it's part of our future.
Okay. Can we get a motion on ordinance number 2018-24?
I'll make a motion that we approve ordinance number 2018-24, approving a project and financing plan for tax increment reinvestment zone number 1.
Okay, can we get a second?
I'll second it.
All right, we've got a second. All in favor, if you'd let me know by the raised hand. And it passes 3-0.
All opposed?
Yeah, all opposed. Thank you, Mr. Pettit.
Thank you.
Thank
Feel free
you.
to call me.
I will.
Yeah. Okay.
So we're ready to get Mr. Volkel back in here.
Yeah, okay. Okay, we are not doing 7A. We're not ready on that one, on the software. 7B, resolution number 43-2018. Ms. Brown?
Resolution number 43-2018, approving an updated Kerrville River Trail Master Plan.
Oh, hey, there you are. Okay.
All right, good evening, Mayor and council members. Before you tonight is an updated master plan for the Kerrville River Trail. As you recall, the trail was funded in 2011 by the EIC for a $6 million 6-mile trail. The first trail segment opened in 2012, and we are nearing completion of River Trail pursuant to the project funding left in that balance. It'll bring the trail to approximately 5 miles, and the graphic here is a representation of the current trail. During the Kerrville 2050 comprehensive planning process, the River Trail was identified in a variety of capacities. We have a couple of different action items relating to the trail, and here are some examples to include enhancing the trail connections, adding connections for pedestrian bike routes for the river trail, adding connection from Trent University, and continuing to develop the plan and the vision for the trail. Here is a proposed master plan with 6 extension potentials. You'll see in yellow is the existing trail, the yellow stars are the trailhead, and the red is the proposed future options. Now it's important to remember that this is a conceptual plan, a master plan, and it's pursuant to funding and easement acquisitions in the future. This is presented to the Parks Board in September. The first connection would be the Trent University connection. It's about roughly a mile or so, and it would cross the old G Street Bridge, travel along the north bank, cross under 27, connect to the cemetery, and back to the west end side of the campus. Number 2 would be the Town Creek connection to the sports complex. Number 3 would be the North Bank West extension connection. That would be the Dietert Center to the Fuddruckers type area. It seems a little bit out of order, but number 5 would be connecting from that segment, looping around Spur 98 Bridge and back to State Hospital area in connection with number 4. Number 5, which I just talked about, and then number 6 would be looping back in the 534 area to the KSB connection, essentially looping the trail into one big loop. Staff recommends approval of the resolution adopting the master plan, and I can answer any questions you may have.
I got a couple. They're real quick. So the 1 through 6, is that the priority choices that you guys made?
No, these are in no order of priority.
Okay. And is there a hopeful timeline of doing this?
It's all pursuant to funding in the future.
Okay, but you guys don't have like we'd sure like to see this by 10 years from now. We don't put any of that in the plan?
No, Mr. Brody, I think this is helpful because we know that there'll be applications that are coming to us for funding at some point.
Yeah.
For different segments to connect to the river trail. And so it'd be nice to have a plan that at least has been thought out as opposed to just kind of one-offs. The other thing that's important is that the development community understands where the future trails might be planned so that they can understand what the opportunities might be if something did happen, and that there could be dedication of easements in the event that they were to develop their property. So it's really just a planning document. As Ashley mentioned, it's very conceptual. You and I had a great conversation about, well, how does this tie into the bike trails and so forth. There's no specific detailed schematics or engineered drawings that show that, but I would anticipate that we would need to have also a follow-on effort to have a bike plan, which is actually in Kerrville 2050 to have a separate plan for that, but needs to dovetail with this plan and perhaps others.
Yeah, so on that, what I would like to see, since I assume because my conversation with you involved bike trails, sidewalks, and the river trail, what I'd like to see, I mean, I can't direct you to do this, but what I'd like to see is instead of having 3 separate plans, integrate those because they're all really the same sort of travel and it'd be nice to be able to look at a plan that showed, you know, pedestrian, bike trails. So if you could, you know, run that up the Parks Board flagpole and see what happens. Anyways, that's all I got.
This is exciting.
Mayor, I have
just a
one
concept.
suggestion and recommendation.
All right.
If we could somehow add to this plan that the city will not use eminent domain to acquire easements or right-of-ways for the river trail or anything related to it.
Okay. What, I need to get some guidance on that. Do we need to add that?
I would like to add it. Need or not, I don't know, but that's what I'm recommending.
Are we looking at a worded document, or are we looking at just this picture?
I was going to say, as a conceptual thing,
So,
we wouldn't need that, would we?
well,
this is just
not
a
needed, but it's not a
plan.
modification to what we have. So, what can he do as far as that? Will the plan ever have words like that, or how would if he wanted to do that, how would he best? Where would that be attached to?
Well, a couple things. You could drop that in. I think the more appropriate out of these documents would be the resolution.
Okay.
That, you know, you could put that in. That's a policy decision.
It can always change, but it makes it harder for someone to change it later.
Right. So right. And so this council later on, or a future council, could always change that.
That's fine with me.
Yeah.
Okay, where are we on that?
It's up to the council.
Okay.
I'd make a motion to add it to the resolution. Is that kind of what?
That's
All right,
what's
okay.
Okay, I'll make a motion to pass resolution 43-2018 with the addition of language. The city will not use eminent domain to acquire easements and right-of-ways for the river trail or anything related to it.
All right. Okay, all in
I need a
favor?
second.
I'll second that.
Yeah, okay, got a second and a motion second. All in favor of that motion or any discussion?
No discussion.
All right. All in favor then by the raised hand? Okay. 3-0, yeah, okay.
Mr. Mayor. All opposed, Mayor?
I'm sorry, all opposed by the same sign.
Okay.
All right, 2. Okay. We come now to the city manager's report.
Yes, so EA is passing around the CIP report. Not really a whole lot to report about in terms of new items, but I would like to point out that the balance of this month in November are going to be busy months on capital projects. For example, Legion Lift Station, Forest Main. We anticipate bond issuance in November, so on your future agenda listing, you'll see some activity around the issuance of bonds, and so we'll have our financial advisor here and talking about that process. Also, the clarifier rehab, we anticipate award, bringing that to you at your next council meeting. And then the granular activated carbon bench top study, which is item 16, we anticipate that report before the end of this month. So it's all coming together, and again, it's going to be a pretty busy fall and early winter in terms of capital projects. And that's really all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Can I ask a question? Just curious on the parking garage, what exactly are they doing right now? Is that, I guess, I've had questions, I park in there, I've seen concrete, they poked holes in it.
We're doing a number of repairs in a myriad of different elements. They're both repairing some of the spalling that was occurring across some of the larger concrete areas. They're doing spot repairs. They're repairing and replacing some of the bearing pads. It's a whole multitude of different repair techniques that are being instituted. They're roughly 30% complete.
Okay.
They're trying to isolate those larger repair areas as much as they can to minimize the disruption to the parkability of the facility.
Are they disturbing the
Okay.
bat colonies?
Hey, let me remind you, we don't do questions to the city manager's report.
Sorry.
Okay. Items for future agendas.
I have one or two I'd like to announce. I talked to the county commissioner today, and he seems interested in trying to get a city-county road workshop at the beginning of December. And I could help with that, or if someone else wants to take that over and try to organize that, that's fine.
All right. And your other one?
Maybe create some kind of policy to where if councils or members are sick, not showing up to meetings. I know that Judy, you're right, you have allergies, but I can't afford being sick right now, and that doesn't really affect what's going on today.
Okay. Okay. Is there anything else for us tonight?
The future agenda. Is it possible to put this on in packets, Mark? This list that you give us, is it possible to put that in packets? Is there something confidential about it?
We actually put it on the website. It's on the website.
It is. Right after each meeting? Where does somebody go to find it?
They go to my department, city manager's office, and there'll be a list on the left-hand side that says CIP report.
Okay.
Okay. All right. We are adjourned at 8:05.
There were items on the agenda, sir.
Oh, I didn't hear from anybody.
No, it's in the
Executive session.
10A and 10B.
Okay. How do you want to handle this in terms of the evaluations?
I wish to have a brief discussion in executive session so that I can be blended in with what was actually done without me yesterday.
But we made those decisions.
I understand that, and since so this is part of the discussion, but basically, as I explained to you earlier, real quickly, we made a decision as a council last meeting to do something, and I wasn't able to attend the redo of that meeting, and in the process of that, saying that I couldn't make it, I was told, well, we're going to have to go through with it. I would be afforded the opportunity to meet with both of them individually, and then it was suggested I meet with the mayor individually. And rather than take everybody's time at some other separate meeting time, I asked to have it on the agenda today.
Well, then make a motion,
I make a motion that...
and you see where it goes.
The mayor's already adjourned the meeting, so
Yeah. But, okay, I made it abundantly clear that I would work with you to get your input into the process. And
Okay, well, hang on a minute, because we've got this problem, and it's a legitimate one.
Let's-
So what are we supposed to do? Because we have 2 items on the agenda that were on there, posted. We adjourned before. Can he just unadjourn or open it again, or what?
That's up to council.
Okay, I tell you what, we are back in session at 8:07. Is there a motion regarding the executive session?
I make a motion that we go into executive session under 551-074 to address item 10A and 10B. The alternative would be to address it out here. So I'm making the motion to go into executive session to address these 2 items as posted.
I'll second.
Okay, got a motion and a second. All in favor of that motion, let it be known by the raised hand, and any opposed by a like sign. So, we are adjourned.
No, we're not,
at
sir.
8:08.
Sir, we didn't dispose of the item, we disposed of executive session.
Make an appointment and have
Now,
your
we
conversation.
voted not to go into executive session.
Correct, it didn't take it off the agenda.
Thank you for what you've done for years. That's ridiculous.
Thank you.
Hey.